Welcome to the Stories That Shape Us, where we have conversations about how discovering your identity, enhancing your relationships, and taking risks lead to a more purposeful life. I'm Tina Morales, and I'm an associate professional counselor and master's level marriage and family therapist. In my counseling practice, I help couples move from conflict to connection so they can start to live out their relationship vision.
I'm Kiera Johnson, and I own ATL Pula Wellness Studio with the vision of giving every family the hope and freedom to live a healthier life. Through our work, we create spaces and provide resources that foster true well-being.
We came together to bring you these stories so you can collect tools and insights from those who have stepped into their power and are making an impact. Join us on the road less traveled. All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the Stories That Shape Us. I am your host, Tina Morales.
And I'm Kiera Johnson.
And we have the amazing opportunity to speak with and learn from Danielle Zapchenk. Please tell me, did I pronounce that correctly?
You did it, Tina. That is correct.
Yeah. Okay. So let me tell you guys a little bit more about Danielle. Danielle is the host of the Parable podcast and a speaker. She loves in any opportunity to help women see Jesus in their own story. Women's ministry is a huge passion of hers, and she leads a dedicated team of women at her church to foster intentional growth. Danielle and her husband, Eric, have two fantastic kids, and they call the Northwest Suburbs of Chicago their home. First of all, thank you so much for being with us, Danielle.
Thank you guys for inviting me. You know, it's funny when you repeat my own bio back to me and then you ask me what I do. Most of that is volunteer. It's just like what I do is my hobby. So to say that that's my work, it's almost kind of surreal to say that, because I'm first and foremost a mom and a wife and a lover of Jesus. And then that, whatever that is that I do with my life, it just kind of spills over into that capacity. So, yeah.
I love that. And first of all, what you just said, right? A lot of times I think we think of work as something that we exchange for monetary gain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you are literally working and serving and doing what you do as a mom, as a wife, as a woman leader in women's ministry. So that is work. And it's so beautiful that you get to do that. So we do want to know a little bit more about what that looks like for you, and just a little bit about who you are.
Yeah. So women's ministry kind of came out of nowhere. I think I grew up, I wanted to be like J-Lo and be the wedding planner. You remember that? That was my dream to plan weddings and to meet Matthew McConaughey. It didn't work like that. But I did end up doing events. I worked in promotions for a radio station locally. That's where I met my husband. And after we had our first child, we got involved in our church, and somebody knew that I did events, and that kind of women love events. There's no event that we can ever have at a church that is not well attended because it's just fun to get together. And really that was my mindset of having that administrative approach to women's ministry. But I think over time, recognizing my need for connection as a young mom and just as a wife, I don't know what I'm doing. So, you just want to have that conversation between women of all ages, of all backgrounds, because even though we're different, there is such similarities. And so that is what I truly love about women's ministry. And I don't like the fluffy stuff. I really want to get into, yes, we can talk about appetizers and Pinterest boards all day long. I love those things, but I really want to talk what does it mean to be a wife, a mom, a friend, and love Jesus at the same time, especially when we're in hard seasons. So, yeah.
Ooh, I love that. It takes a village. Even for me, you sometimes think you're the only one going through something, and it's to stick that out, especially during pivotal changes in your life. You can't.
Yeah.
I'm so curious because I think it's really cool what you're talking about. We do need community. We do need to be surrounded with other women, just other people in our lives to be able to have some of these hard conversations, or maybe dive in deep to really get to know like what's going on in your heart
Yeah.
and soul. And I'm curious if there's been a personal story for you or a personal experience where you were like, this is actually what I do need. And this is maybe what influenced or kind of led me into events in general, but then what led me into women's ministry.
Mhm. I think when I really have to go back, I just started seeing a therapist for the first time. And initially I was wondering, yay. But, initially I was like, oh, therapy means crisis. So you need to see somebody when you're in crisis. And it's just like a car. Everything needs maintenance, especially for somebody who's been in ministry or just maybe the last 2 years, right?
Yes.
We need somebody just to be like, I just need to talk to somebody and make sure I'm on the same page. Like, am I doing okay here? Or just encouragement. And that's really what she told me. But one of the questions that came up in our conversation was, why do I do things a certain way? Why do I care so much? Why do I people please? And I really had to think back, and I don't think it's everything, but it definitely stemmed from a female relationship I had high school into my college years.
Yeah.
It was not good. And I think that made me hesitant of being like, I wonder what she's thinking. Is that okay? And it wasn't really me. Like, I wasn't able to truly be myself. And I was always worried about what she thought. And it wasn't a healthy friendship. So then to get to college and to get into my adult years and have women who supported me, loved me as I was, and didn't try to stuff me down. I'm like, oh, okay, this does exist. And I think there's so many of us that have those unhealthy relationships growing up, and that has stuck with us. And I just want to break free of that and have an opportunity for women to have that safe space as well.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. There's so many parts of it that I love too, is because one is having an experience or like exposure to the fact that this does exist, to be able to have a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
But then also to be able to create space for. It sounds like that other relationship that you were talking about in high school going into college, there wasn't that space for you or your experience or your thoughts, right? And that in and of itself is just a marker for dysfunction and unhealthy relationships.
Yeah. I think it was almost like in the background. Like I didn't even recognize it was happening. And I have to realize that so many people, we come from broken relationships. There's so many broken people in our life that has caused us. Everyone has their own baggage and their own stuff. But to have a place that we can go to and say, I'm wrestling with this, and say, okay, we see you as we're not here trying to fix it, but we're here to listen. And I think, gosh, listening is so important.
Tell us.
I think it's so hard because I think we're all just like, here's all our like life story. But when somebody's telling you like something that's really hard and tragic or difficult, and then you're like, okay, great. And now let's talk about me. Like we need to be those safe landing places for people. And it's hard. It takes practice doing that. So yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I think everyone wants to feel seen. So yeah. That's amazing.
Totally. That's right, Kiara. I do. I think everybody wants to feel seen. They want to feel loved. And I think in a world that is full of see me, see me, see me, it's not really like that soul that's being seen. We don't have that many people in our life that can really share that experience with us.
That's amazing. Seriously.
Yeah.
What would you say, and I heard a couple of things already, but what would you say has been like the most fulfilling part of your work in women's ministry?
I think everyone wants to see like a quick life change, like an immediate thing that happens.
Yeah.
But I've been in, I think, 11 years I've done women's ministry. And I think it's that slow process. So there's a woman that we met a couple years ago, and she, just to see that transition of just a study of understanding what grace looks like, she had no idea the gift of grace, what that meant for her in her life. And it was like a light bulb came off, and you could just see her blossom, break free from some of those chains because she has not had grace in her past experiences, in her family relationships. of not to say that, oh, wow, everything's fine, I figured it all out in life, but there was life change that is happening. And that's the most beautiful part of witnessing that and seeing women find friendship and relationship with other women that they've never met in their life before.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I think it takes, that's why I love the community part of what you're saying. I think it takes other people to heal sometimes. I think that's what's beautiful about the relationship. If you get with the right people, you can break free of so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And just know that it takes time. I think when I got out of college, I wasn't super far from my college friends, but when I was married, we have to remember there's a lot of things in our life. We have jobs. Sometimes you have to take care of little people. You have like a new spouse that we have to now have a relationship. Yeah. So how do you juggle like all of these things? And building friendships as an adult, it is very hard. It is so hard. Not because I don't want to, but it takes intentional time over and over. So to think that way in a small group, if you meet once a week, every other week, once a month, that's going to take a while to build. And you have to be, it's hard to, because you're putting yourself out there, and do they want the same thing? It's really challenging.
Ooh, you just said something that made me think about, I remember like when I was going through life groups, when I first came back to my faith, and this idea of, yes, I want people to see me. I want to feel, let me clarify that. I want to feel seen. Yeah. But to feel seen means that I need to show women, or I need to put myself out there. Yeah. How have you navigated that in your women's ministry with maybe some women who might not be ready or willing to maybe put themselves out there to like really show other women, hey, this is what I'm struggling with, or I'm cool, I'm fine, let me be the one to just see you. Right? How do you navigate that?
Well, let me just say, I didn't come into women's ministry with a background in women's ministry. I didn't know. I had a background in communications and running events, but as you know, we're all human. So I do have a team of women that are with me. Like, they are awesome and they are consistent, and they bring in their own stories as well. So there's one of my friends, Amy, who we have like some guidelines. So I think it's always a good reminder. We bring this up at every study, and granted, so we have events, we have studies, we have serving opportunities. So it's always different. So people can jump in wherever they feel most comfortable or just available. But when we get to the studies and we talk our small groups, these are the things, we're not here to fix people. This should be a safe place. So you don't need to go home and tell your spouse or your friend, be like, you know what so-and-so said? Yeah. It's hard. It's so hard because sometimes you're not thinking of it in a negative way. You're just like, hey, this is an experience I heard about. But really, if somebody's bearing their soul, you don't want to hear about it from another friend. Like, I heard you're going through this, because then you're like, there's no trust in the group. Yeah. So there's a whole list of things. Yeah. And so that's something we're truly trying to build and be more intentional, encouraging them to hang out outside of our church, because I think it's important to remember, yes, our church is a building, but church can happen anywhere. So we need to be able to build those friendships, because just like COVID, the church not necessarily went away, but you guys can do this too. Like, everybody can build relationships. I just believe that the church is a tool or an opportunity to help foster that. And it's really up to the person to say, I'm in it. I want to grow this relationship.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good.
Seriously.
So good.
Small groups for me have been life-changing. I remember I did a married millennial women's group, and then now Corey and I are in a couples married millennials group, and they're just just sharing space. Nothing's wrong. Like you said, it doesn't have to be crisis. Nothing's necessarily wrong, but sharing space with someone similar life phases, it's just been so just overall enhanced our quality of life. So it's just been amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I've been in some cruddy ones too. It's okay. I think some really cruddy ones. And it's okay to say, you know what, I'm going to give it give it a couple of weeks. And if it's not working, or even if somebody comes up to you and say, I really need you to lead this group, if you're not passionate about it, is going to come across immediately. So just be aware of that. Like, it's a good learning experience, but not every group is going to last 25 years.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
Sometimes it's seasonal.
Yeah.
What would you say was most fulfilling? What would you say has been the most challenging that you've had to overcome and push through in your work?
I think one for me is recognizing I need to be able to ask others for help, to be a part of our ministry. I think for me, just in general, because I hear so many stories, I know that they're working long hours. I know that their marriage is hard, or they just have little kids, or it's just a hard season for them. So I feel bad asking them for help. I never want anyone to feel pressure of any kind. And I don't think I come off that way ever, but that's just one thing in the back of my mind. So I'm like, oh, well, I'll just do it. And so for a good amount of time in that beginning season of that 11 years, it was just like the Danielle show. And I was just doing everything. Maybe I wanted to control it just a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just like things a certain way. But also what was happening is like the only person to do women's ministry is just Danielle. So what happens if something, God forbid, happened to me? What if we had to move? Then the ministry's over. So recognizing, how do I support other women, encourage them to come along in our team? And I guess I didn't recognize that until a friend kind of mentioned it to me, like, we need other people. And I'm like, okay, yes. And I want to support and empower other women. So bringing these women in and making them feel, different small group leaders, using their gifts to, decorate or do our events, set them up in a way that looks beautiful. Or just even teach and lead. I think I came back from the boot camp that I met Tina at, and I was just like, who wants to share their story? Like, who wants to because our church is amazing. They allow me to teach, and they are excited for me to teach. They're not just okay, we'll allow it. They support me in every way. And so I want that in women's ministry to be a safe space for women as well, to share what they have learned. And I know that's scary, but yeah, so I want to find ways. That's been a hard part for me of okay, how can I incorporate other women? So it's not just me. It really isn't, because it is about, if it's the women, our church is called Westridge. If it's the women of Westridge, it should be the women of Westridge that is running this ministry. Yeah.
That's so good. And what's interesting about that is it makes me think literally of Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus had the power to do it all himself.
He did.
Of course. Yeah.
Power. Could have easily done it all, but he decided to bring people along to do his work.
Yeah.
Which is so fascinating to me. It's you decided to choose people who don't necessarily have all the power, but you wanted to do the work through them as well. Yeah. And I just think it's fascinating, and it's a great reminder to us that we don't have to do it all. And he really does encourage us to be a community, to do church together, right? We are the church, to really be able to kind of go out and spread his gifts, his message, his grace, all the good stuff. So that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. I think too, it's been hard. I'm just a person to be like, you want to talk about our deep, dark life stuff? Let's go. But not everybody is ready for that. And I get that. But just wanting to see, I know what Jesus is about. I love him so much, and I've seen the work he's done in my life and others. And so to want that for somebody and they're not choosing that yet, or they're just not at that place, that's hard to sit back and be patient. But that's just what I've also had to learn, is just the patience of it. And there's different seasons, like you guys said, and just being willing to wait, and God's he's got it.
Right.
You just have to love him through it.
Right.
Yeah.
So in that, this question probably is going to feel like it just easily goes into it. How have relationships been influential? And I'm going to just do a little caveat. If you hear people out here doing stuff, we got some children playing out here.
Sure.
But how have relationships been influential in your personal journey, but also in the ministry work that you do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, I mentioned like the women in my life earlier that maybe weren't the best friendships. But then I did see those relationships that I'm like, how can I have that? And obviously sometimes you only see the exterior, but just want a desire to build that. So I just think of my mom. She's a hairstylist. She talks to everybody, but there is something about her when she walks into a room, she can quickly build community. And so, and yes, that is at a surface level, but that's very important for people to understand if they have that, because it makes people feel important and seen, like we talked about earlier. So I saw that from a very young age, and I'm like, okay, I don't know, maybe innately I just knew I could do that, but just walking in and having those initial conversations, and then that's going to lead to something deeper. I think it's easy for us as women, those words that have been said to us before. I remember people have told me, Danielle, you always just want to be the center of attention. And I shouldn't say people. It was one person that said that.
Sure.
And, and just like, you always have to just like put yourself into everything. And that, even going into the podcast, it took me 2 years to say yes to that. And I finally spoke that to my husband. And I said, this is what I think of myself. Like, I'm just trying to show off. And he's like, are you kidding me? It's kind of like just saying, like, this is what I'm actually doing. This is my gifts and talents. And that should not be like stuffed down. Ooh. So I think that's easy for us to get like, hold on to this. I mean, that happened 20 years ago. And I still think about that every now and then. That holds me back so much. So to try to break free of those kinds of relationships and mindsets is important to be aware of.
There's just so much power in what you're saying. Like that's just evidence of the power of the tongue, right? Like we can bring life or death through what we say to people. Yeah. In one instance. Yeah. In one instance we can bring death, but in one instance we can bring life, right? Like there's so much power in that, and how relationships really do wire how we see ourselves and how we see other people. Yeah. Like it's so powerful what you just named.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. It's easy, cause you can say things like, I say things to my kids all the time, and then they'll repeat them back to me. I'm like, where did you hear that from? I'm like, oh, that was me. And so, yeah, it's just, you have no idea. And I've had people come back into my life and say, oh my gosh, do you remember when you said this? And this really impacted my life. I had no idea, but I really feel that God can utilize us as those vessels. And we have the power to do that and to speak life into people's lives. It's very important. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's so good. So good.
Another good reason for therapy. There's probably a lot.
Yeah.
That is. Hold on to those things that impacted me. So
yeah, you have no idea. Just like the silly things of like, and asking yourself the question why, like, and kind of, I love reflection. And that's something, if we're going to talk about later, like just kind of thinking back. I don't do this every day, but even what my therapist just said, she's like, where do you think that start? And I really ask like the Holy Spirit, like just kind of show me, because I have a tendency to be like, oh, wow, that idea like just popped into my head. Way to go, Danielle.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you thought of that. And I just have to recognize and remember like, okay, maybe God is really trying to work in my heart and trying to remind me of something. And I felt like that just initially came to my head. And that was only because of the Holy Spirit, because it takes a bit just to really think like, why am I doing this? What are the words that are going through my head over and over? I just asked a lady on one of the podcasts, I said, what is the lie that you keep telling yourself that you know is untrue, but you can't break free of it? And she took her a minute. She's like, I can't even say it out loud. And she's just like, I don't think I'm good enough. And I'm like, I feel that all the time. So it's just that openness. We think that all the time. So that's the beauty of like small groups in any kind of relationship, is once you like break free and say that into the the atmosphere to another person, then they can speak truth back into be like, that is absolutely not true.
Yeah. And I think it takes a lot of what you've shared. It takes a lot of, for me to be able to maybe speak life into you. Sometimes I think it's harder to speak life than it is to speak death into something.
Yeah.
We can say critical things, and it's a lot easier for that to stick. Whereas speaking life comes from a place like, I actually have to have connection with you first and know you intimately before I can challenge maybe some of those lies that you've been repeating to yourself that maybe you heard somewhere else. And so I want to ask you, just for you, what would you say is like a really practical skill or a practical tool when it comes to maybe challenging some of these thoughts or building friendships as adult women or just overall growth? Like, what would you say is a really practical skill or tool? I know I said it about 3 different topics, so you let me know whichever one you want to touch on.
I think we've already said these again, but I think it's important to reflect on it. So number 1 is just sharing. Obviously this is with somebody that you trust, that you have a relationship with. I don't know, maybe it's in the grocery store too, who knows? But if you feel comfortable and you're just sharing, what are those things that just keep popping up? What are those lies? What are those negative things that you often tell yourself, holding you back? Because I think once we do that, there's been so many women, just like what I had that interaction when I was interviewing this lady on the podcast. When she said that, I could affirm her and say, you know what, you're not the only one. Like, I also think the same thing. And I don't know why, but I just feel like that's just something I struggle with too. So it feels so good to know you're not alone. I think that's what the devil does. He tries to get us to a place where we just listen to what's going on in our thoughts that are not of the Holy Spirit. And we over and over, just picking away at those little parts of our soul. And then we believe that, and we will continue to believe that. And so once you share it, that helps so much. And here also listening to other people's story and being a really good listener. Because what happens is I feel like when I listen to people's story, I can understand their background, maybe why they've done things a certain way. And it helps me to better have empathy. My daughter and I were just talking today in the car about things going on in the world. And it's important to know if something happens to be like, if you say oh, I believe this and this is all I believe. Okay, but what's the other side of it? What is happening to what's the question? What's the action behind it? And I think it's imperative for us to listen to somebody that's not like us. And maybe we don't exactly believe the same things, but it helps us build that empathy muscle so that we don't have these reactive attitudes immediately. So that's really helpful. And then also to reflect, because it's easy for us to oh God, this is happening again. I don't understand why this is happening. And we can say this, nothing is ever going wrong. It's always, you use those words, never and always. Yeah. And I forget, just because we're human, the Bible's filled with people that forget all the time of God's goodness. So looking back at a journal, or maybe it's just bullet points of God was here in this last season of my life, and remembering him, he's still there. So that's hard for me to do, because it's just when somebody's saying, what's a praise you have today? I don't know. I just can't but if I take the time, wow, look at the fruit of this season. He has been everywhere and walking with me every step of the way.
So good.
I love that one. That's what I need to do, reflecting consistently. I always say I'm going to journal. About 2 days I fall off, and I'm take that and try to do a little bit better about that.
Sure. One resource, I guess, it is called, it's a journal. It's called The Next Right Thing. It's by Emily P. Freeman. And it's in a different way of a journal, because sometimes people, you're just am I just supposed to write, Dear Diary, I think the idea of praying, journaling, worship, it's so different for everyone. So one of them is just if you just want to put a bullet point of I really liked my latte today, or I had a great time with friends. And she has like different lists, and like the way that it comes across, it doesn't seem like such a burden. And I guess if you're just not a writer, that it shouldn't be that way. Yeah.
It's funny because I've always started Dear Diary or something.
Yeah.
It feels a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So thank you for taking off the pressure. I might just try.
Yes, I love it.
That's
I
awesome.
love it. Another thing that I do, because I'm also a journaler. I absolutely love to journal. But for me, like they're like letters to God. Like it's like a really intentional way of like praying, where I'm just like, Heavenly Father, and I'm like having a conversation with someone that I care about, someone that I trust, and someone's really intimate. That's how I kind of do it.
Yeah.
Because the Dear Diary, I struggled with a very long time.
Who is this diary, and how do I know?
Awesome. So take the pressure off people.
Yeah. And then I think just hearing different ways of how people pray too, of like, what is something I want? What is something I need? And I like just draw like big circles, or like, who am I praying for? And I just like write a name. And it's just like helping me like just process it. I'm not writing every single detail, but it is fun to go and look back and be like, I wonder what you were thinking during this time.
Yes.
But it helped me.
That's amazing.
Yes.
I love it. All right, this is one of my favorite questions, but if you could leave 3 lessons for someone who's trying to forge their way in their own story, what 3 lessons would those be?
I think it's just like when you first think like, why does my story matter? Because, we're all beloved children of God, and he created us. And so he is in the mundane, and he's also in the miraculous. And so
Danielle, hold on. He is in the mundane and in the miraculous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. I just needed to process that for a
I'm
second.
on my wall like somewhere. That's good.
Yes.
I just think that sometimes we think that God is, when we hear someone's story, like I used to hear like people's stories, such tragedy, such hardship. And I looked at mine and I'm like, okay, well, my story isn't good enough. Yes, I've had moments of heartache, but I wouldn't say I haven't struggled with a huge disease or an ailment, or people have abandoned and left me. So I was like, okay, well, where does my story fit into this? Like, why does it matter? So I think for me, of recognizing everybody's story does matter, because when you talk about it, like just like we're having a conversation right now, we can recognize how we've learned lessons in our life, and then that kind of triggers something in somebody else's life. So yes, you were maybe in a season that you felt like God wasn't with you, but maybe did he bring people into your life that supported you through it? Was there a job opportunity that maybe you just was like, it wasn't that great, but it led to something else? So I think it's just taking a moment to assess your life. I did this thing well, I wasn't with her, but Jenny Ellen wrote a book. Just Jenny and I. She wrote a book, and it was helping kind of travel through David's life. And you went through your childhood. You went through like the good and bad things that were through your childhood, through your teenage years, and you kind of walk through the whole thing. And at the end of it, I was like, wow, like, yeah, I was a dorky kid who used to do forensics speaking tournaments, not CSI, that I would just do and learn that on my Saturdays in high school. And I'm just like, what a dorky thing to do. I loved it. And I did theater, and I like loved people. And so I've seen that throughout my life. And here I am now as a mom, loving people well in my family, but also women. And getting to speak at our church and having a podcast where I get to share other people's stories. So,
yes, God doesn't waste anything.
He doesn't. He doesn't. So I think just taking that moment to recognize, because I think it's our lives are go, 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 go. And so when you look at it, you're like, oh gosh, today I can't wait till the next day. But just recognizing that it matters and taking a moment. But that's once a week. It doesn't, or 5 minutes before you go to bed. It doesn't have to be big. There's no checklist to it. Just kind of recognizing where God has been, and to see that you get to see God in the mundane and the miraculous. Yeah.
Oh, I'm like speechless, but I literally, I mean, that usually happens because I'm just like overwhelmed with emotion, like all the things that you've shared, and just the true beauty of what you are describing here, where it's like if we can pause, if we can take time to reflect, if we can really look at our lives and answer the question, why does my story matter, how it even matters, like it's just, there's just so much beauty that comes from that, and it gives us so much joy in our days, in what feels like the mundane, because even that's being used.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think that that's, oh my gosh, thank you.
You're welcome. It's funny, that you say that, because sometimes, like, I wrote this down last night and I'm just like, okay, I'm just writing down my words. And to see that again, like when we share our thoughts, like it impacts people in so many different ways. Like every time you read the Bible, it's going to impact you if you've read the same verse over and over. It just depends on where you're at and what's your season. So thank you for that encouragement back. I mean, it's really been a gift, because it's just like, it's funny because I just think this is just my life. I'm just sharing what's up.
That's what I love about it, right? Like, we are so used to our lives because it's ours.
Yeah.
We don't recognize how our story and what we've been through, what we've gone through, is impacting or is reaching out and like literally grabbing hold of someone else and literally like, hey, like I can walk with you on this because this is my life and this is what I've been through. It's just, there's so much power in it.
Our final question, is there a question that you wish we would have asked that we didn't? And how would you have answered it?
I think one is just like, how do you realize the impact of God on your life? I think we kind of went through that, but I think it's just knowing that I didn't realize the impact of God on my life for quite some time, because you're rushing. I would say I'm a checklister. I'm a person that loves to get stuff done. And especially when it's hard, I don't even want to breathe through it because I just want to get out of it to get to the next thing. Mm-hmm. And so in that season of just realizing like there is impact in every season, and sometimes it's small, and sometimes it's quiet, and sometimes it's going to be really loud. So just recognizing, that there's seasons, and God is going to continue to make an impact on your life and the people around you.
Yes. Ooh, I like that one.
I do. Anything. It's just,
I know. That's what keeps coming to my mind. I literally, how do you say it? Nothing is ever wasted. Is that how you say it?
God wastes nothing. Like,
yeah.
I think so. Nothing's ever wasted. Like back, like a few months ago, we were talking and just like nothing's wasted. No job, no bad experience, no good experience. I mean, it's just nothing's wasted. I think if people, to your point, took that practical skill or lesson and reflected, that you would see that at different points of your life. And that's what makes me emotional. Is he's with you at every point. At every point.
That's good, Kiara. That's good.
My heart needed this conversation today. I will tell you that.
It's funny how that happens when, you're just like, we're just here for an interview today, but whatever somebody else is able to share, like the Holy Spirit is like connecting us in a way that we're able to speak encouragement and, just to kind of help bolster each other's faith. We have no idea. Like there's so much going on under the surface. And so I'm grateful to be able to do that.
Yes. Seriously, Danielle, thank you. Thank you for sharing parts of your story. I mean, there's so much more I'm sure that we could learn about your story. But thank you for sharing parts of your story, and thank you for sharing like your heart. I think that's what I feel that's coming through here is like you're sharing your heart, you're sharing your soul, your passion for Jesus and just the work that God does in our lives, and you emulate that. Like it's coming out of you. So I
such a glow.
Yeah.
Just a bright spirit, and like I could just tell you just have this purpose on your life, and I've been touched by this. So
oh my gosh, guys.
Yes.
Thank you. Keep coming. Yes. I'll take it all.
Yes. Well, we always want to ask if we want to learn more about your ministry, what you do, listen to your podcast. Where can we send them to?
Yeah, well, you can always catch me on Instagram. It's my name, Danielle, Danielle, and then Zapchenk, which is not confusing at all. It's Z as in zebra, APCHENK. But otherwise, DanielleZapchenk.com. That leads you to the podcast. You can find it on any platform. It's called the Parable Podcast. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, we will definitely share all your contact information. Again, thank you.
Yes.
You are a light, and you bring so much. You just brought me joy. So thank you.
Thank you, guys. Great to meet you, Kiara. Thank you.